BookTube. I mentioned yesterday in my Last Week in BookTube video, it turns out a lot of you were happy to see Last Week in BookTube returns, but it's been so long since I did one that it turns out from your emails that I missed as much as I did. Okay, that's fine. I'll get better. I'll be better for next week. I mentioned a whole bunch of events that were coming up in September. I forgot at least one major event where I am a co-host. but I also mentioned something called Tudortember. And I left a link to the Hungry Bookworm's channel where she talks about this. There are other co-hosts. This is an event where you celebrate, as the title would imply, the Tudor era. I would imagine that most people who do this for the month of September are going to do it through the lens of fiction. But as I mentioned yesterday in my video, every month sees Tudor titles. Every month of every year sees Tudor titles of one kind or another, usually a lot. And when I noticed Tudortember this time around, I thought, well, I definitely want to do that. And instead of making grandiose plans, what I thought was, I'll just read all the Tudor-related stuff that's coming out in September. As you know, if you watch this channel, new releases are kind of my bailiwick. You know, everybody to each his own. People read all over the map. That's one of the reasons I love watching so much BookTube. But my own patch is new releases. I get a lot of secondhand books. I did today. And I reread a lot of secondhand books, but the vast majority of reading I do is new releases. I like to keep abreast of new releases, not just make a fig leaf attempt, like so many of my critical brethren do, but actually keep abreast of new releases. And I found that with an inhuman amount of application, it is possible almost to do that. You wouldn't think it was true because, you know, 500,000 books come out in the Western world, 250,000 books come out in America every year. And I limit myself just to America, and you would think, okay, well, then that's impossible. You can't possibly keep abreast of that. But you can lop off a large number of those books if you take out scholastic books, school books, language books, instruction manuals of one kind or another, Bibles, religious catechisms of one kind or another. If you take out, there's a vast, vast amount of that 250 million titles that no one would read. You don't read them. They're books to use, not to read. I firmly believe that if you take all that stuff out, you're left with a far more manageable number. and a lot of that number that remains is self-published stuff that is not quite in my remit. I gulp as much of it down as I can. But I'm talking about my sort of bailiwick is new releases in the 15 or 16 genres that I read from the major houses, from the major traditional publishing houses. And when you break it down like that, you actually reduce it to a field of reading that I can just barely keep abreast of. And I tend to do that. So that's what I told myself for Tudortember, that I would just read September's offerings that are Tudor related. And I have 4 of them. I'm going to do 4 of them in September that I wanted to show you in case they're of interest to you. These aren't out yet. They're coming out in September. And they are across the board in terms of the kinds of stuff that you're getting. Like, for instance, the first one is a romance. It's a magic romance, and it's Tudor in name only. There will be no research, no period accountability, no period accuracy of any kind. It's just that it's called The Book Boyfriend by Jeanna Louise Skinner. And it's about a woman who inherits a rundown bookshop and finds a Tudor knight trapped by a curse in a book. And she's able to release him from the book and maybe can release him into the present day, or maybe herself back to the Tudor times or whatever, to break the curse somehow. So, you know, this is one of those Tudor in name only things where the author probably just stuck a pin in a wheel in terms of the era and just went with it. I'd be willing to bet there won't be any actual research in here. You just have to take one look at the armor on our bodacious hero and his hairstyle to realize that certainly the cover artist did no research. But I have doubts about the book on those grounds as well, and also doubts because I think I remember reading that this author is one of those people in the 21st, of course they are products of the 21st century, who likes to talk about neurodiversity instead of mental impairments. I've seen this a lot with people who aren't just claiming ADHD, but actually suffer from it. from a neurochemical inability to concentrate. That's a defect. That's your brain not working the way it should. That's not a hidden, somehow extra kind of parallel dimension strength. And yet it's not treated that way. It's not talked about that way in the 21st century because nothing is. Nothing can be. You can't be insane anymore in the 21st century. You can only be neurodiverse. You can't have a mental impairment that you need medicine for. Instead, it's just the way you are. It's only a matter, if this mind frame takes root, it's only a matter of time until people start thinking that about, I don't even know, diabetes, appendicitis. Well, I'm sorry you didn't live to 14, but it's just the way you are. You're appendix diverse. I seem to remember that this author is like that, but maybe that's only her social media. Maybe she won't import that to the book. We shall see. Even if she does import it to the book, I might still be totally entertained. I might still be totally captivated. As far as I know, I've never read this author before, so this is one item for Tudortember. It's Tudor in name only, but there is more fiction coming out. Of course, the Tudor era is rife with fiction. And this next one is by Rebecca Paolini. I don't think I've ever read her either. This is the Hearts of Tudor England series, and this is the latest one, Misrule My Heart. Very lovely cover, same as Book Boyfriend. And I believe the story to this one is torn straight from actual Tudor history, not actual people. I think it's a made-up heroine, but her predicament, which is that her family affiances her to an older, powerful nobleman. And she goes along with it because she's a creature of her time and a creature of her family until she realizes how old this nobleman is and how, ruthless and smelly and gross he is. And many a young girl, many a young woman at Tudor court and in adjacent circles in the Tudor era came across that exact same problem. And they didn't have any kind of fantasy solution to it. They lived with it. They died on the inside or had the life beaten out of them. That's not going to be true with Misrule My Heart. You know that. Instead, this is going to be a book where, against all odds, in Tudor England, love conquers all. I'm okay with that. I've read plenty of my share of that, including very high-profile, mainstream published historical fiction with historical characters who certainly did not have a happy ending. So love certainly did not conquer all, but Tudor writers love to do that, so we shall see. I will certainly give it a try. I'm not going to miss anything Tudor during Tudortember. Then the last two we'll look at are nonfiction. The first one is by John Matusiak. This is The Tudors and Europe. And it takes as its springboard a lot of the nativist, xenophobic movements that swept through early Tudor England. And that never really went away. Henry VII dealt with a lot of that. Henry VIII had quite a few movements like that. Elizabeth had some that were really pronounced and vocal of English people saying no foreigners, get rid of them all, not just the Jews, but everybody. And this book, I guess, sort of tackles that issue directly instead of as one chapter in a broader survey. So it might have a lot of details in it that will be really good, that I won't really have thought about in isolation before. Fantastic. And then this next one is big. I think it's fairly recondite. I picture that I have here says that it's from Bloomsbury, but I seem to remember being some imprint of Bloomsbury that you will never see in your bookstore. Maybe you will. I don't know. If it really, really interests you, you'll at least know to put it on a list. This is by G.W. Bernard, and it's Who Ruled Tudor England? Paradoxes of Power. There is the manufactured family portrait of Henry and all the people blood related to him. Of course, they never sat for anything like that painting. But the book analyzes exactly how power was exercised. We think about the king. But the king usually didn't think about ruling. Elizabeth thought a lot about ruling. Mary almost never did. Young Edward almost never did. They had other concerns. Henry VII and his true daughter, Elizabeth, she was more like him in spirit than she was like anyone else. They thought about ruling their kingdom, but most of the other Tudors did not, except only sporadically. So if that... Another salacious text message. The people can't leave me alone. And when you know that, you realize, well, the kingdom still kept running. People still kept doing things. So who was exercising that power? And how? And I love that kind of thing. Absolutely love that kind of down in the archives, nuts and bolts histories of how, especially an era like the Tudor era, that is so known for its surface. Right, we have a million miniseries, a million movies, a million books, They're all concerned with the surface, the gaudy costumes, the parade of wives, what mood is Henry in today, but very little concerned with how your province, your county is actually run. Who is it that you answer to, and who answers to them? I love nuts and bolts studies like that. There aren't enough of them of Tudor England. So I'm greatly, greatly looking forward to doing this for Tudortember. So there you go. I thought I'd show you 4 books that I'll be reading in September. And if you're doing Tudortember, I would love to know what you're reading. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Is it something really big, like The Other Boleyn Sister or Wolf Hall, God help us all? Or previous eras like Man on a Donkey, or The Iron Archbishop? Or is it something else, something that's crossed your palate, maybe a self-published thing? Love to hear about it if you have plans for Tudortember, and I'll leave a link to at least the one video that I know of, but it's a hashtag. Like a lot of these things, you can find everything you want with a hashtag. So I'll leave the hashtag and everything else that I could find down below for Tudortember, right around the corner. An event right up my alley. Thank you, BookTube.